Chad.
Hi, Ammon.
This is Chad Christensen. He's running for the legislative office in the state of Idaho in District 32. Welcome and invited Chad into my home. Let everybody know that he's running for office. Let people know a little bit about you. Give them a choice, an option to either vote for you or not vote for you. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Chad?
Yeah, I'm from Idaho Falls. I was born and raised there. I went to Skyline High School and then went to Ricks College, and then went on an LDS mission to San Diego. Came home and finished Ricks and met my wife there, Stephanie. We have 8 kids. Oldest is 18, awesome. I guess is 7. And
so you're a family man. You're a down to earth person. I know you have quite a history. You served in the military.
Correct.
You've also served in law enforcement.
Correct.
You do not currently serve in law enforcement.
No, I do not.
You were telling me a story earlier about kind of that transition, why you got out of law enforcement, and what was the causes of that. Would you mind sharing that story with us?
Yeah, not at all. I worked in law enforcement, like you said, military police and state probation and parole, and then also my last position was the state welfare fraud investigator. But finally, this case came about that it was a welfare fraud case, and it was 2 employees, internal employees for the state of Idaho, who were committing the fraud together. And one was giving the other one, $1,000 a month in food stamps. The one worker was a Medicaid worker, and the other one was a food stamp worker. So the Medicaid worker was approving this case for her food stamp worker friend. Fran got in the system and approved her for another 14 months for $1,000 a month on food stamps. So
we're talking about a significant amount of money.
Right.
It'd been going on previously, $1,000 a month. A friend inside the system approved another friend for another $1,000 a month. But we're at least talking about $14,000 or more of the taxpayers' money
right.
that was going to individuals fraudulently, and you discovered this.
Right? Yeah, I had a Medicaid employee come to me, and she was scared. Hey, I want to tell you about this, what's going on, and I'm nervous about the repercussions. And
so when you began to investigate and to bring this to light, what happened to you?
Yeah, I started to investigate it. Got IT involved, and they were looking at all the keys and on the computer systems, and so then my bureau chief, on the IT guy verified what I was, our suspicions, and so my bureau chief, I let him know what's going on. Hey, this case is substantial and it's credible, and so I started investigating more and more, and people in the state government over here in Boise caught wind of it, and the department head the second in command of health and welfare gives me a call and said, you can't prosecute these my employees. And I also believe the head of the Department of Health and Welfare called me too as well after that, but we argued on the phone and said, I want to do is, these are employees that should be held to a higher standard than just your normal welfare fraud recipient. These people are entrusted by the people of Idaho to do what's right, and they should have integrity and honesty and not do these kind of scams. And so she said, well, the Idaho can't afford this kind of a scandal in the government or in health and welfare, and we can't sustain that. I'm like, well, I disagreed. I said, this is something that I think if we show that we're holding ourselves accountable, the public's going to respect that more.
So she actually come down and says you can't prosecute or further investigate these individuals in her department that was clearly committing fraud with the taxpayers' money.
Right.
Because she didn't think that the department could handle such scrutiny,
right.
And that the people would lose confidence in them or something to that effect. And your take was that there needs to be accountability. People need to be held accountable because that's what builds confidence with the people.
Right.
And if there's not accountability, then that just means the fraud and corruption is going to perpetuate until the people lose total confidence in the department or the government. Was that kind of your...
Right. She made it clear, if you try to do this, we're going to put some pressure on you, or whatever kind of... Her tone was just that way, threatening.
Yeah. What about those who did have direct authority over you? What did they do about this situation?
Yeah, like I said, at first my bureau chief was like, okay, let's go ahead and do this, keep me in the loop. And his tune changed later. I think she got, that those people got to him, and he kind of changed his tune and became more resistant. And just the way he spoke to me and his tone, it was different. So I knew he'd been gotten to. I knew he'd been persuaded, because he kept kind of saying, well, what about doing this instead? What about administrative sanction? So he was trying to do administrative sanction. I said, no, this is a lot of money. This is public employees that should be held to higher standard. I want to go criminal.
I mean, this is a public employee, government employees that are actually using the government, system, the software and everything,
Right.
and that are approving monies, $1,000 a month, to another individual, and it's real money, it's real fraud, and it was really going on, and they wanted to just treat it like it was an administrative error.
Right. Well, yeah, that's what ended up happening. I told you before, I was written up for silly things, and I just had enough, and I said, hey, if I can't do what's right, I don't want to work here anymore, and I quit. And so I kept asking the investigator that was over here in Boise that we're still friends, and I kept asking, hey, what's going on with this case? I said, well, it's still open. He kept saying for a while it's still open. Finally, he said, well, they closed it as administrative error. So there was not even any repayment. They just closed it as an error. And
So the money wasn't repaid. There was no really correction or reprimand, and they just covered the whole thing up and said it was just an administrative error, like someone keyed in something wrong
Right.
into the computer.
Right.
So, how did that affect you in your department?
Yeah, like I said, I kept getting written up because I think they wanted me to stop, and like I said, I was saying no, I want to do what's right, and I have integrity, and I'm not going to put this, just let this go by. And we kept clashing, and I kept getting written up, and actually, if I can do the right thing in this department, I'm going to quit. So I quit, and I tried to go to the media, but they just viewed me as a scorn employee, and they didn't want to touch it. And I think the media doesn't want to touch a lot of government issues,
Yeah.
and they stay away from it because they're kind of in cahoots with the government a lot of times, and don't want to rock the boat.
Rather than being the people's watchdogs,
Right.
they become the cover-up for
Right.
a lot of what goes on. So ultimately, because of the scrutiny, because of the persecution that you received from different individuals, you end up leaving the department.
Right.
And and the individuals that were actually committing the crime, and they ended up just basically being a cover-up, and no accountability was placed upon them.
No.
And the people, because of the media, never even got the opportunity to even really hear and understand what's happening to their tax dollars and how it was fraudulently being distributed among government employees.
Right.
It's interesting because, as you know, I spent almost 2 years in a prison under false charges because of malice by U.S. prosecutors. And while I was in there, I met many people that were in there for theft or fraud, and for a lot minor amounts than what you're explaining.
Right.
And, these were not public officials. They were just the people, if you will. And many of them received sentences of 10, 15, 20 years for things that were minor, a lot less than what you're explaining.
Gives me a little. I start to rise and.
Yeah, and to me, I think that's a whole nother fraud, because
Right.
they shouldn't be punished that way for that amount of time. It does nobody any good.
Well, to me, it's the tyrant peasant attitude. Here's these peasants that we're going to punish, but we'll do what we want.
That's right. And any of our own, we're going to protect.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's somebody who goes against that, we're going to make sure we oust them and make sure that they're no longer part of us, and go as far as they can. To conclude, at least on this part, I just want to, say thank you for standing up, for being willing to.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, you were willing to go against the grain because you knew what was right. You were willing to stand up to those that were, were being corrupt.
Right back at you.
So, and I know that you suffered for that.
Yeah.
So, anyway, thank you. And I think that for all of us who have the opportunity to vote for you, I think that that should mean something. I think that that will explains to us what you will do in the future because of what you've done in the past. That you will stand up to those that are using and abusing the system and using the system incorrectly, and that we can trust and rely on you to do that. Couple other things, if you will. I just would like to ask some general questions, and let the people kind of see that you're a principled person, that you base your decisions off of principles and not off of who you know or what the circumstance is. Right. And so, what in your words, your own words, what places the limitations upon government? How do we know how far government can go and when they've gone too far?
Well, the Constitution outlines, in detail how far the government can go, and the federal government and its encroachments are so unconstitutional. I could talk for hours with you about you, and you're an expert about that too. How so many agencies in the federal government shouldn't even exist, like the BLM and the Forest Service and the FBI, and all those things shouldn't even exist constitutionally.
And you're not saying they shouldn't exist because you dislike the people that are in them. Right. Are you saying they shouldn't exist because they haven't been authorized by the people to be there?
Exactly. They have no authority constitutionally to operate. The only constitutional law enforcement agency is the sheriff. Because he's elected by the people. People say, yes, you have the authority to perform law enforcement for our county. And they never gave the FBI or the BLM the authority to do such a thing in their land, in public lands. And
so I think this is a really, really crucial point that a lot of people don't understand. And so there's federal laws, there's state laws, and then there's county laws, and even city laws, right?
Right.
And so, but then there's the people, and they hold the power in this country. They're supposed to hold the power because they won their sovereignty during the Independence War, and they chose a different way to govern themselves.
Right.
And they retained the power. And so any power that is authorized within government comes from the people.
Correct.
Is that correct?
Absolutely.
So what you're saying is that there's the authority to police and arrest somebody has never been given to federal agencies.
No.
The authority to police and arrest somebody has been given to the sheriff.
Right.
And it's been given to him through an election.
Right.
Right? And there's no election that authorizes policing and arresting power to anybody outside the sheriff's realm.
Right.
So, for example, if the sheriff or one of his deputies abuses the people's rights, the people have the ability to remove him through an election.
Absolutely.
Hold him accountable.
Right.
But when it comes to a federal bureaucrat or a federal agent, there's not much they can do about it if he abuses the system.
Right. I mean, for example, your story, but with the prosecutor, which abused all your rights and when you were tried, and what happened to him? Like you're saying, nothing, because the people don't hold him accountable. The government just same circumstance. The government sweeps it under the rug and moves on.
So, because we have federal laws, we know that as long as they're constitutional, that they're legitimate laws authorized by the people. What are, say the executive branch of the federal government, what are they supposed to do if someone is breaking a federal law? What are they supposed to do if they don't have policing and arresting authority?
If someone's breaking the law, go to the sheriff and hey, so what's going on? You enforce this for us. And
so I think to me, what you said was very important. That the way that the people authorize the enforcement of these laws, federal, state, and county, is that, for example, if there's a federal law that is broken, and they could, have good evidence that is broken, those federal bureaucrats, those agents, are supposed to go to the sheriff, who the people have given the arresting and policing of power. They're supposed to go to the sheriff and say, hey, look, we're asking you to police and arrest and enforce this law.
Right.
When a state is running constitutionally, the federal bureaucracies go to the sheriff
Right.
and ask him to enforce the law.
Right.
Okay? And why is that important?
Why it's important? Because, like I said, what you explained earlier is that we have the corruption, and that holds someone accountable, holds the sheriff accountable from, if he did something wrong, and did something illegal or unconstitutional, that people can hold him accountable. If he's enforcing a law that's not constitutional, or the federal government asks him to enforce a law that's not constitutional, and then the people see that, okay, he shouldn't be doing that. Well, he needs to go. Then we can do that.
So it's all about the people being able to be in control, to be able to control and delegate those powers to an individual that they can either vote in or vote out.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I even, I mentioned on my campaign page on Facebook that there's so many department heads in Idaho, department heads of government, like I was explaining to you, the department head called me and was bullying me around, tried to. I told people I want these department heads to be elected for that very reason. And people like that idea because, there's a lot of issues like, for example, Fish and Game, people feel that it's not ran well and the governor appoints his cronies and Good Old Boy Club to be department heads. And so I want all these department heads to be elected. So if something goes wrong and they don't follow the Constitution as well, then we can get them out.
The governor is elected and he's the head of the executive branch, and
Right.
then he appoints individuals. And we think that, because the governor's elected, that therefore this is a republic form of government. But what happens is when a state or the federal government or any it could be even a county gets too populated, and that individual, such as who's over the executive branch, gets too many departments and too many people, it's not a true republic. The people can't hold those agencies and departments accountable.
Right.
So therefore, there's a couple things that need to happen. The jurisdiction needs to be split up so that the people can actually affect the vote, and it happens that way. Or the lesser agencies, head of agencies, need to be elected.
Right.
So that the people remain in control. That's
Right.
the important part.
Exactly.
The people need to be in control of the agencies, including the head of the agencies, the governorship. They need to be in control of the sheriff's department, which includes the policing and arresting power.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a crucial thing when someone can actually take your liberty away and actually keep you separated from your family and your life and everything else. And to have that abused, I know what that feels
I
like.
can imagine.
And it is extremely important that we do not allow an agency out of Washington, D.C., who has literally hundreds of thousands of people, to enforce law here in our counties and in our states. And anyway, we could talk for a long time about
Right.
these issues. I just want to point out that Chad has these issues right. He's willing to stand for them. I believe that he'll be a great representative for us, and I would encourage all those in his district to vote for him. And thank you very much.
Thanks, Ammon.
Yep.